Throughout my adult life, my focus has been on making the world a more beautiful place. Initially, I pursued this goal as a hairstylist, working on the external appearance of individuals to make them feel more beautiful. However, I wanted more, so I began to shift my focus to helping people make better choices and achieve greater beauty from within. As a transformational life coach, I specialize in helping you identify and change the limiting beliefs that may be holding you back. Join me each week as we discuss, interview, teach, and explore the fundamental principles of healthy relationships. Welcome to Conscious Conversations with Louisa. In today's episode of Conscious Conversations with Louisa, I'm speaking with Ross Miller. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation to being on here. I am so excited to highlight you to everyone. And please introduce yourself and let us know a little about you.
Well, you kind of laid it out there. Thanks for inviting me. I really honestly didn't know what to expect. I was thinking about it today going, so do I, because as you mentioned, I'm coming up next month, I'll have 15 years sober. So I'm used to speaking to groups like this, and especially since COVID, a lot of speaking on Zoom, just in recovery meetings. And in that format, we kind of tell our story and kind of what it was like, what happened and what it's like now. And so I was kind of really wondering what the dynamic was here. Like Louisa said, I'm actually CFO of the Fellowship House Sober Living. We are a nonprofit. We're the oldest sober living in the Conejo Valley. And we're a nonprofit that my wife and I opened up our home 15 years ago when we got sober. And I've been taking care of, right now, I'm in my garage right now because I just finished dinner. We have 12 alcoholics and drug addicts that live with me, and my wife and I. And we just finished dinner. We have dinner every night at 5:00 after work or after their meetings. And then we have our evening, and kind of I'll get into that a little bit more about what that's like. I'm also an architect here in the Conejo Valley. I've been practicing I graduated in 96. So I've been practicing for quite a while now. I'm a partner in a firm called 360 Architecture and Design in Westlake Village. And I'm a yoga instructor. And it wasn't something I think what I'd like to say is I had planned on becoming an architect. That was one thing that I'd written down when I was a kid. I don't know. It seems like I have quite a few people in here that are kind of from my genre. And I grew up on, as a kid with all those Dr. Seuss books. And my mom actually, when she came out a few years back, or not a few years, 10, 15 years ago, she brought one of the old Dr. Seuss books that had to do with like, what is my profession? And when I was like 4 or 5 years old, I wrote in architect. And apparently that's what I wanted to be back then. And that's what I strived for. And I ended up getting that. And I've been married for 34 years. So with a 33-year-old daughter, got married young, became an architect, had a family, the whole genre. And then 15 years ago, kind of both my wife and I blew our lives apart. And we stayed together. We got sober together. And we've remained sober together since 2018 April 18th of 2008 and March 25th of 2008 for my wife. So she's getting ready to have her 15th birthday this month, and I'll have 15 in next month. And about halfway through our sobriety, I ended up taking a risk. Like Louisa knows that I'm all about following heart, following dreams, and kind of recovery gave me the opportunity to not, trying to think of the words to say, step out of the familiar. And I'm not a big gym person. Working out is something that just doesn't appeal to me. But I just made the leap of trying yoga. And what happened was I made a decision that I needed to do something for me. I was about 7 years sober. And I decided on my lunch hour, I could try something like that place, Orange Theory or yoga or something to get away for an hour and do something to better my physical well-being. I've been working a lot on my spiritual well-being. I've been working a lot on the well-being of my family, the people around me, but I hadn't really focused on another part of the triad of being physically responsible for my health. And I showed up at Core Power Yoga like on a Tuesday or Wednesday afternoon at lunchtime. And I was so frightened that day, Lisa, that I pulled up in the parking lot and I saw all these beautiful people coming out of the yoga studio. And I'm all like, this isn't for me. And I literally got back in my car, drove back to my office, and went back to work. And then that voice the next day was like, you should really give this a shot. And I went over there and I did the same thing. I got out of my car. I saw the same people. And I just was like, you know what? Just step through the fears. It's not about, I like to share about the way I grew up was I was always comparing my insides to your outsides. And it was a losing bet every time. It was a losing bet because my perception of other people's happiness was something that I made up in my own mind. And I would say 99.9% of it is completely false because I know nothing about it's my expectations, my beliefs. And so I walked in there and I gave it a shot. And what I saw happening, which was so interesting, and it was so dynamic to my life of recovery. When I got sober, I'd been out on my own business-wise for about 2 years. And I had about 30 jobs on the board. I was really right at 2-year mark, like really setting into it, but I was killing myself with drugs and alcohol. It was all about work. It wasn't about family. It was all about what I could get, what I could do, how I could control my own destiny. Which is like, 30 years old, you're kind of like, yeah, I'm doing this all. And the reality was I wasn't doing any of it. I was in a position to see things coming into my life with this idea that I could control things, with this idea that the things, to a certain extent, my experience had set me in a position, but it wasn't what I've come to find it, it's not always my doing. And when I kind of let go, I was kind of like, I was told I had to go to 3 meetings a day. I didn't go to rehab. I got sober on my couch. And I did 3 meetings a day in Alcoholics Anonymous for a year, 7 a.m., noon, and night, 7 a.m., noon, and 6 p.m. for a year while I ran my business. And while it gave me this, it taught me this idea of letting go, that the world goes on without me. And if I'm in a better position to come at life from a place of love, from a place of kindness, selflessness, everything else will be taken care of. And 7 years later, it really reiterated itself in my business life. I stepped away from the office. I'm running my own office and I have employees and I'm like, you guys are in charge. I'll be back in 2 hours. And I told them I'm going to go do some yoga and I'll come back. You guys got it. We'll be fine. And what I found was that as I took care of myself, physically, emotionally, everybody around me took care of me also. Everybody around me took care of me also. And it wasn't that I asked them, or I believe it's that life took care of me because I was taking care of life. And what I found was that my business was growing while I was there less, which made no sense. And then I got asked, or they had a teacher training, and I'm like, I just wanted to do it. I wanted to try it, like Louisa was sharing. It was it was something I was feeling really good, like that smile on her face, right? It's like we something feels good, and then I want more. And and I do that too, Louisa. I make these lists, and I'm trying these things, and all of a sudden I've got a list that's like this long, and I'm like, what did I do to myself? Because I'm trying to manage and control my experience instead of being a part of it and enjoying that ride of the experience. And plain and simple, I did that teacher training just because I wanted to know why I felt better. I wanted to know what was happening internally, not really externally. Why when I left did I go back to the office and I really didn't worry about things? Because the truth is, I set myself in a great position because the people that I brought on board, that I asked to be a part of my life, of my business, I was able to give them full trust. There's a reason why I innately hired them, right? So why do I need to micromanage them? And through allowing them to grow. And it's the same thing that I learned in recovery of, as I went through the steps and I got sober, and I have a sponsor. I sponsor a lot of young men. But the more I give, the more the St. Francis prayer kind of says it all. Lord, make me a channel of thy peace, that where there's hatred, I may bring love. That where there's wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness. That where there's discord, I may bring harmony. And it goes on, and you'll notice there's a verb at the beginning of each phrase of that, and that's the word bring. It's this action prayer, that it's not a prayer about praying to God about getting. It's a prayer about praying to God about giving. What can I bring to allow the world around me to open up and be of use instead of about self? And so I just planned on I didn't plan on teaching, and they said, they bribed me. They said, you speak well, you should teach. And I said, I'm an architect, I really can't take that time out. And they said, well, we'll give you free yoga if you teach twice a week. and that was the gist of it. I said, I'll do it. My wife agreed. She's like, yeah, we don't have to pay that monthly fee. And I get one extra person that gets a free yoga membership. So I was all in. And what I found was I came into the room, and it was an amazing thing, because I'm really a frightened child. I really have a lot of fear about getting in front of people and opening up. And I have learned, and I experienced the learning of the truth. And the more I share my truth about who I am and where I am, there's nothing like it. What I showed up when I had that first class I taught, I'd been in that yoga studio for a while, and I'd made a lot of friends just practicing, like Louisa comes, and I know what it's like. And like Lisa, you go into something, you make a lot of friends. And then I showed up there to teach, and I was frightened. And when I walked through the room, I turned around and I looked, and it was all my friends. They were there to support me. And from that moment on, I started to understand the idea of community, the true idea of community, where you're able to.
Amazing, because coming from AA and having that community, and then going into this and saying this is where you felt the community. I'm just kind of fascinated that you knew you wanted to be an architect and you became one, and what it takes to know to follow your purpose and your vision and complete it. I'm curious, what was it like with both you and your wife and having a child, and the first part of your marriage not being sober, and then how did you both really get together on the same page and move forward together? Like, how did that happen? Because that's extra extraordinary. I mean, I coach a lot of people, and That is one of the jaw-dropping. How do two people connect after years of partying together and not sober, and then move forward together?
Well, Sima grew up out here in the Conejo Valley. I'm originally from Oklahoma. I moved out here when I was 18 years old. I was one of those teenagers that I went to college one semester after school and I flunked out. And I had a choice. I had a restart. I got a card from my stepdad. He said, here's a guy to ask, go out to Palm Springs. He might be able to get you a job as a carpenter we're building the La Quinta Hotel right now. My stepdad worked for a bank. And I went out there. I drove my truck out here by myself. It was kind of my first leap of faith. I was just in between 18 and 19 years old, and I hopped in my car and I just left. I drove out here. I didn't know a soul. And I was leaving a kind of burnt down life as a teenager with a fresh start, not knowing anybody in California other than this man on a business card. And I showed up. I got a job as a carpenter's apprentice. And within the first 2 weeks, I was living with the biggest crystal meth dealer in the Coachella Valley. I had what we call in Alcoholics Anonymous a geographic, where we're trying to solve our problems by moving to a new area. The problem is we follow ourselves. And it just so happens, which I didn't know, is where Palm Springs was where everybody went to party. From LA, that's where they kind of went on, spring break or things like that. And my wife came out there. By the time we got married, I was 21 and she was 20, but we met out in Palm Springs, and we got married at like pretty much immediately. And the reason, we fell in love. And I think that was the biggest thing that kept us together, was that innate love that we found in the beginning. She was a girl that loved to party the way that I partied. And for the next 20 years, we built a family and we built a life. And we were both extreme examples of drug addiction and alcoholism. Yet we held it all together. A lot of people are kind of, it's weird. People are kind of amazed by my story. So I decided to go back to school to get my architecture degree. And I went to a place called SciArc. It's Southern California Institute of Architecture. It's one of the top schools on the East Coast, on the West Coast here in Los Angeles. And I came out of that, and you have to keep in mind that I have a daughter at the time when I go back to school that's maybe 3 or 4 years old. My wife and I are full-blown drug addict. I mean, we're both crystal meth, opiates. And I go back to school. I end up being valedictorian of the school. I end up coming out of that school working for the two top firms in the world at the time. I was a designer at Frank Gehry's office, and I was a designer at Morphosis, which are pretty much what they call now the Starchitects. I worked on Disney Concert Hall. I worked on the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao. All this at that young age while drinking and getting loaded. I grew up where I grew up in the Midwest. It was like it was just, you worked hard and you played hard and you kept things going. You kept everything tight to your vest. I kept family close. All I did was I went to work. My wife took care of our family and my daughter. I went and I worked and I brought home a paycheck. And we just had this kind of I would call it a small life, but a big life at the same time. It was very tight knit, yet we did a lot. And my daughter was with us all the time. There was not there wasn't kind of what you see or what's portrayed of that everything's just a real shit show. And we neglected our daughter. My daughter went on every vacation. It was like we made her part of our team. My wife said, don't ever bring anybody outside into the house and we will always be fine. Does that make sense? Don't let any outside influences come in and it will just be us. And we can take care of each other. And we actually, my wife, she grew up in the Canal Valley and her dad built the Wood Lake Bowling Alley. If you guys know the Wood Lake Bowling Alley, that was the family bowling alley. She grew up in that bowling alley and I'm an only child and she came from a family of 4 sisters and 2 brothers. And they all grew up in that bowling alley.
So I'm going to interrupt.
Go ahead. No, you can interrupt me. I know I start talking and
no, I love it. When she said, no, this is our little unit, no one comes in. Did that also include her parents and family? Or was it like because
oh no, that family was so. The other side of this story is that when I had come, when I was out in the desert, there was a bad. I was actually dealing drug. I was dealing crystal meth, big quantities from Oceanside to Santa Maria to Indio, and I was, like I said, with one of the biggest crystal meth dealers, and a drug deal went bad. And there was a lot of stuff missing and I got held hostage for 2 weeks. And if you've ever seen the movie The Salton Sea with Val Kilmer, check it out. It was like you see in the movies. It was very scary. I disappeared for 2 weeks and then I showed back up and she said, you're getting out of here. So, and that's why I brought up about her family in the bowling alley. Her dad said, just move in. And we took care of my father-in-law for the first 12 years of our marriage. She was the youngest of 6. And her dad, he was 55 when he had her. So they were like traveling buddies her entire life. It was the kind of picturesque, the dad with his youngest daughter, that's his pride and joy. And he invited me to come and be a part of their family. So I went from an only child that grew up on the other side of the tracks in the middle of Oklahoma to an instant family in Thousand Oaks, California. And that's what I meant by keeping tight. We took care of him. And what happened was when he passed away at 89, we kind of fell apart. It was I had never experienced death at that close. My wife lost her best friend. And that was kind of that transition where we finally went off the deep end. It really drove our drug addiction and alcoholism started to drive a wedge between us through grief. And grief was the catalyst in 2003, I think it was, 2001, 2002, where, and this was at the time when Oxycontin had just come on the scene here in the Canal Valley, or basically nationwide. We lived in Lynn Ranch here across the freeway. Her father had built his house there in 1962. You'll like this, for an acre and a quarter, 4,000 square feet for $32,000.
Wow.
And the neighbor who was renting just happened to be the head nurse there was a doctor at that time that the doctor and the pharmacist ended up getting, I think, over 100 years in prison for the Oxycontin ring that they'd set up in Thousand Oaks. And wow. They were my neighbor. And my wife started doing Oxycontin then. And at that point in time, and I bring this up because I mentioned that innate love that held Sim and I together, that I believe held our bond together all these years. That first time my wife tried to get sober in 2000, I think 2004 or 2005. And at that point in time, she weighed 87 pounds and her body was literally dying in front of me. And I didn't even know. I thought she was sick. I just thought she had the flu. And her sister came and she was beside herself that we had let this come to this. And I got my wife into treatment. And she tried to get sober by herself, and she stayed sober for a year, but I wouldn't. I had gotten to a point in my life where I didn't really care. I still loved her, but I wasn't willing to give up the one thing that had gotten me to where I am. I was a full believer that the reason that I got to where I am was everything that I did to get me there. When the truth was, it wasn't anything I did to get me there. It was me being in the right place. It was me doing the right things. And the drugs and alcohol just kind of took me down. And then I got her getting loaded again with me. And in 2006, she went off the deep end again. She weighed under 100 pounds. And the Ventura County Sheriff showed up at our door. And because she wanted me out of the house. So I wasn't at that time, Louisa, that kind soul that you know now. It had stolen everything from us. And when she came back, she went to treatment. And when she came back, she said, she didn't tell me I had to get sober. She didn't give any demands. She looked at me and she just said, we tried this before. We will die if we both don't do this. You can do what you want, but I have to do this a certain way. And in that moment, I said, I'm sorry, but I'm leaving. And I walked out the front door like the little kid carrying his bags, running away from home. Problem was, I didn't have any bags in my hand. And I made it about 4 houses down, and I had that moment. I had a moment when I realized I was giving up everything in my life to just do what I wanted to do. And something in me made me turn around and walk right back and knock on the door and ask if I could come in the house. And I said I would give it a year, and I was willing to try. And here we are today, getting ready to celebrate 15 years.
I've been doing the interviews for so long, and I have never been choked up before, like on this, because it's so easy for you to have just walked out and just been right and righteous, and had all of the evidence of whatever on earth you wanted to create just to stay right. And you chose, because there's always that little voice that is speaking to us. And thank God in that moment, that voice was powerful for you and that you followed it. But that's also what created you to have, I'm fascinated with, like, I'm sober, and you'd be proud. I'm actually, a little over 30 days sober. I just decided the day after Grammys to stop drinking. Nice. And I haven't been drinking, and it feels fabulous. And I've done hot yoga for 13 days in a row. But like, for me, those moments of clarity are so powerful and huge decision-making. Actually, I had intended not to tell the story, but I'm going to actually say it. So when I was 17 years old, I was looking for a therapist, and I took my parents' insurance card, and I thought I was calling a therapist just to get some support, right? Well, I didn't realize it called an inpatient service unit, and I did it. And so they looked up my parents' insurance and decided I would make a fabulous inpatient person. And I call it my $70,000 slumber party. And I had roommates, and I met alcoholics and addicts I'd never been around. I grew up in a Catholic school with, like, pulling up my socks and, saddle shoes and the whole fun yard, but I'd never been around addicts before. And I got in there, and all of a sudden I realized what the world was. And I was like, I think I'm in here because they need my help. Like, they really need me. And I had no idea how I had ended up there, but I met this girl who was also 17, and she was magical. And she just was a ray of sunshine, like how I experience you when I'm in the yoga room, and how I experience Lisa, just a ray of sunshine. And I'm like, does she not know how magical she is? How is she not experiencing how she lights up a room? So when we left the center, I heard that she overdosed and died. Mm. And I remember thinking, what if I have that light and I don't know it, because she had no idea? What if I might be special and I don't know it? What if we all have something special about us and no one really knows it because she just died? But it did introduce me to this world that scared me half to death. And I ended up not really ever playing with it too much because I was so afraid of it, because what I had seen from when I was so young. But I was always curious to mental health support, knowing that I was in there for a reason, because there was a purpose for my life. And I tend to gravitate towards everybody who I find is so magical. And I totally get the concept of like comparing my insides to other people's outsides. Like I remember, and I also, at that time, remember going to meetings that I didn't know what I was doing there at the time, but I remember them saying, don't leave before the miracle happens. And I was like, if I could take that concept and put it everywhere, I bet you it'll change my life. Of like, don't quit. So so you guys get sober. At what point did you then have a sober living center and decide that you guys are now going to host everyone in your home with this?
So nothing, I mean, it's interesting. The greatest gifts in my life are never planned. They just aren't. It's never something that I've set out to do. They're all based on circumstance, how I show up in the circumstance, how I act in the circumstance, and how I surrender in the circumstance. It was 2008 when we got sober. And I'm sure all of you guys remember 2008. And to be an architect in 2008 or in the building industry, it was a shutdown. I had my home, work life was still, barely hanging on. And we're all deciding to get sober. And my daughter at the time is graduating high school. So it wasn't, you have a teenager too. It's not a very pleasant, it wasn't pleasant in that first year. We started allowing people to stay with us out of necessity to meet the rent. And it was like, but there was a stipulation with staying with us. You had to be sober. You had to be doing what we were doing if you wanted to live in our home. And so we just started letting a few people stay with us to make the rent. And the treatment centers, and look, we were getting sober. So when you come into Alcoholics Anonymous, part of the thing is service, commitments, doing all these different things. And my wife had got a job at a treatment center. I was doing anything to kind of make ends meet. I was speaking at meetings. I was doing everything that they were telling me to do, was to show up, be a part of things. And the treatment centers, and kind of started seeing people that were staying with us that were getting better. People saw something happening that we didn't see. And then all of a sudden we would get calls. Can you, from somebody, be like, this is such and such at Horizons or whatever it is, that inpatient that you called. Hey, we have somebody here that needs a place to stay when they get out. Would you be willing? And we were like, well, if they want to do what we're doing, here's what we do. And my wife she grew up with she grew up in a family, and I didn't really grow up in that kind of family. I had a great family, but being an only child to a family of 6, it's a whole different dynamic. And so she grew up in kind of this big household and she ran it as a young girl. She was the one that ran everything because her dad trusted her. And so people started sending people to us. And my wife was working at the treatment center, and it's so wild. We basically just kind of opened up our house. We're like, okay, we're going to be the Fellowship House Sober Living. And you come with us, you stay with us, here's the rules. And the rules slowly developed. We started building a grassroots program in our house. My wife liked to call it the 5-Star Salvation Army, because we live well. It's my home. This is my garage that I got a big TV on the wall. This is where everybody watches TV. They get TV once, they get it on the weekends and one night a week. Other than that, they're working their programs. At 2 years sober, she helped this woman up at a treatment center in Malibu, and her husband was just really off his rocker. Long story short, both of us ended up, we had somebody helping us here, went out to North Carolina for a year and started helping people out in North Carolina, specifically that group. And ever for the past 13 years now, we've had people from being flown out from North Carolina to stay at the Fellowship House. We've had people flown out from Texas to stay in our home. We've had people flown out from Colorado and Michigan to stay in our home. And generally they stay with us for 1 to 2 years. And they come in and they become a part of our family. And they grow in this kind of 5-star boot camp. And we treat it what it is, it's family. We believe that just like our relationship it didn't lose the love. The love was never lost. Our hearts were lost. And the Fellowship House rebuilt our hearts. And God rebuilt our hearts. Our program is basically, we live in this for the first 10 years. My wife and I lived in this house with them 24/7. My wife worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, taking care of this family. 4 years ago, we got a condo about literally 3 minutes down the street at the bottom of the hill. I'm in Newbury Park off Ventu, and she got a place right down there. So she's here from 8 in the morning when I leave till 8 at night when I'm home at 5, but we all have dinner at 5. She takes care of everybody from 8 till 8 at night, and I'm on the night shift from 8 at night till 8 in the morning. And we've been doing that for the past, all these years. What happens is everybody in this house is up at 5:30 in the morning. We do morning meditation, morning readings. You do it on your own. We don't do it as a group. And we all go get ready. We go to the morning meeting here in town, 7 a.m. Everybody comes back. I go to work. They go to the gym. Then they go to the gym, or they go to yoga. Then they go to the noon meeting. Then they come back. They do step work. Then they learn to cook. They learn to keep a clean room. We try to get them back into society to get jobs. So over all these years, we have a lot of connections to help people get back to work. This isn't a place where people kind of sit around. You have to be busy out living life. We all have dinner together as a family every night at 5 o'clock. And then after dinner, we all go to a meeting, and we come home and we do it again the next day.
Wow. It is absolutely amazing. I don't know about you. I've
been sober living for 15 years.
Is this what all of them are like, or is this just yours?
No.
Because I have no idea.
We're a little bit different because we're a family. That's the dynamic those people, the reason why we're a nonprofit is those people I helped in North Carolina, they had a lot of money. And we were like, you should help us help all these people. And, they go, how we're going to help you? we're going to show you how you can become a nonprofit so that this house stays the way it is and money doesn't ruin things.
I love it. I love it.
And at 2 years in, we did all the paperwork ourselves, got an accountant, did everything, made the filing, and we were accepted to become a licensed nonprofit so that we could serve the community. We're sponsored by Amgen has helped us, Target has helped us. The community provides to help all these, I like to call them kids, but right now I've got a 65-year-old, I've got one in their 40s, about 6 in their mid 30s, a couple in their 20s, and I got one kid who's an ex-Marine that's like 19.
Wow. I actually, I was talking to you a couple of weeks ago about one of my friends who called me and said, can I live in your backyard in a tent? And I was like, no. And then, but she's not ready to do anything different yet. So, but she will be. I want to give everyone an opportunity to share feedback, ask questions, and Ross, I mean,
I hope I wasn't boring. I'm like, I'm holding back tears. I am so grateful that you're here. As a matter of fact, before I open it up to everyone else, this is a question I'm asking everybody, because everyone asks me every time after the call, how do you get these amazing people on here every other Tuesday? So what had you say yes to me to being on here? I've learned to always say yes.
I love it.
The greatest gifts come from walking through a fear of saying yes. There's no reason why I shouldn't say yes. There's a reason. I believe in my heart that, because through experience, that the more that I have the opportunity to share my experience, that it can change a life. It's happened multiple times.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that becomes the common denominator and factor with sharing. So thank you. All right. Now I will be quiet for a second.
Oh.
And who would like to share feedback or questions?
Well, I had a question. It's not really a question, and I may have missed it at some point, so I apologize. But, I always find that people who have a broader context in their life, something that higher purpose, and it starts off, mankind and society and organization and team and group, and the closer you get down when you're operating on an individual level, you're right next to the suck hole, you fall off. But when you have bigger rungs of this ladder that are broad, you just fall to the next one, fall to the next one, fall to the next one. And there's all this stuff to keep you from going down that rabbit hole, going at the bottom. And I think, when did you realize that higher purpose for you? Was there a specific moment, or was it just, besides the, hitting rock bottom, but the higher purpose of it aspect? How did that evolve in your mind?
I think it's a gradual. That's an interesting take, because in the program, you do the steps, and the steps are so that you can find a power greater than yourself. They don't push you to God. It's the saying is, deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. And that fundamental idea has been kind of blocked by self-will, that isolation, that minute self that you kind of described, just being that. And the idea or the concept is to do a self-examination, have a sponsor, start being into this program, doing some work, going out, making amends to your relationships, and then living a life of service, basically. And some people come into it quickly, and some people come into it what they call the educational variety. And the book talks about the newcomer finally realizes that he's undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life. that he's, this, what we call a spiritual experience, comes over a period of time. And through the experience of what I said, of saying yes, of when I know in my heart that I need to be going to the office, if I just get this client, it will solve my problem. I have a mistaken idea of what's going to make me happy, in that the money is going to do it, the relationship's going to do it. If my wife acted this way, if my boss, if the client only gave me this much more, I would be like set. But it's never been, when I was able to sit back and really look at that, it's never been the case. I've always been, I've achieved these things, and I've never gotten a full, that joy. And Louisa mentioned the word that popped out when she was talking to me was this idea of a purpose-driven life. My purpose was me. That's what I learned. I was told, go to school, get a job, get a family. That's your purpose. But nobody handed me a book as a kid that's like, hey, this is how you I was walking through life shooting from the hip, thinking this is how to do things, which I didn't really have any direction. And so, like, stepping through the door of fear to the yoga, stepping and meeting these people in my life, and being, there's a prayer that I had to learn when I first got sober, and it's called the set aside prayer. And it's, God, please enable me to set aside everything I think I know for an open mind and a new experience. Help me to see the truth about my work. At that time, it was my wife, because we were not happy with each other. But what it did is, it was for me to reiterate to myself that I am set aside. And it's not that I have to let go of it all or it's wrong. It's a request of this busy mind. Please set it aside so I can have an open mind and a new experience. Allow me to try. I mean, Lisa's jumping into teacher training. I mean, come on. That's like jumping through one of the biggest fears. When I did it, I was like, oh, dear God, here I go. What did I sign myself up for? When I went for that first job interview, at whatever job it was, or I jumped back into school and I'm like, I'm 24 years old. I'm never going to do it. I go there and there's like all these 18-year-olds, and all of a sudden I'm like, dude, I know what the fuck I'm doing. These guys don't have a clue. And that experience over time, this last 2 years, 3 years, when COVID, I got into doing breath work. And then that projected me into, my friend said, hey, have you ever done these ice baths? And I'm like, are you kidding me? I've been doing ice baths for the past 2 years now. And all I did was I said yes. And that network that you described, it's amazing. It's like, and it has nothing to do with what I do, but it has everything to do with how I am and how I can be in the world.
And I just wanted to follow up real quick before Kevin has a question. I know he has a question, but what you were saying was something that I know that Louisa, we've worked on, and we talked about in other sessions, is about everything that you thought was going to make you happy. You had all these expectations of how things should go. And really, once you got rid of those expectations, obviously, I bet things started to make much more sense to you.
It has so much freedom. And I tell guys that I work with, because I work with a lot of younger people, and I'm like, why do you got to know everything? I go, do you like Christmas or Hanukkah? They're like, yeah, I love it. And I go, do you want to know what the fucking present is? And they're like, why are you stealing the joy out of being surprised? That you need to know what's best for you. Because what's happened is the joy of living has opened up, because I don't know what's coming. And I've got enough years of experience in life now. Nothing's going to kill me. There's nothing. Even 2008 didn't kill me. We lose money, we gain money. Money is the easiest thing to make. It really is. If I put my nose to the grindstone and I'm focused. I've always survived. And I've been through, I mean, if you're old enough, you've been through a few market crashes. We've all lost, but we're all still here.
Thank you.
Oh, true. So
So I
true.
don't want to be hindered by expectations, but it's a hard thing. It is. It's a hard thing to let go of the expectation because the idea that it's going to bring me joy. But if I can kind of split that thing and be like, set it aside for an open experience, new experience, the new experience could possibly be way better. Maybe it may be way worse, but it's something new.
I love it. Kevin O.
All right. So I got two questions, but the first one's kind of easy. You talk about how, you're an architect during the day, you're doing all this stuff with the fellowship house during the nights. How do you get that work-life balance and still spend quality time with your wife? And so,
I think because we're both on the same plane, we both have the same mission. When I get up in the mornings, I'm here. I'm up at 5 every morning, and I have about an hour of just what I call it's my my meditation is not that I'm sitting there kind of cross-legged, and my meditation is sitting out on the balcony, cup of coffee with a cigar, and I'm thinking about the day ahead. Just that idea, Louisa, of the 24 hours, right? What can I do for the day? And what do I need to get in order for the day? Not to build expectations, but what do I need to show up for? Then I go down to the condo at 7:30 and I'm with my wife till 8:30. And we have our hour together where I make her tea. She comes down. We spend that time, a little morning devotion together. We read some books. We talk about where we're at, what we need, how we need to help each other. We stay in and then I go to work. I'm at work or I go teach yoga. So I either go to the office at about 8:30 or about 9 o'clock, or I go teach at 8:45, and I don't go into the office until 11. Pretty much only 2 days a week do I go into the office before 11 o'clock. And then I focus on my work. Then come home. We're together at home at night for dinner. And that was kind of the dynamic. And I'm glad you asked because, like I said, I grew up an only child, so I didn't really have this understanding of like big family life. And this home and the people that come into it, they are family. I am invested in their recovery. I'm invested in them coming to life. And when I think what gives the strength and the purpose in that is to see someone recover, to be a part of somebody's bottom, I've married a couple of, a few years back, the guys wanted me to marry them. They made me get license. I had to go to that online and get whatever you do to get where you can marry people. I've watched them have children now. I've had 2 deaths in my home due to an overdose. So I've seen the beauty and I've seen the tragedy. And the ability to help bring somebody out and to find their purpose creates that blending of life, so to say. So it's no longer about how am I finding time for myself? My time is everybody's, is really what it comes down to. And it's worked that way for my wife and I. We've been married 20 years before we started this. And both of us, I know 100%, she would say the same thing. My marriage has never been happier. When it's about somebody else, she feels more taken care of today than she ever did before. When I just came home and gave her a check and we had dinner and we kind of watched TV. Now it's like, we went out for date night the other night and we went to Farfalla and had dinner, and that was our date night. We had an hour and a half to go have Italian food over in Westlake, and we came home. She went down to the condo and I stayed here.
Well, and I think you just kind of answered my other question too about the fellowship house. I know you're changing the lives of others, and I was going to ask what is the greatest takeaway, and how is that changing you and your wives' lives?
Yeah, it's how it's changed. It's the dynamic of our relationship has grown tenfold. But I never experienced that, what it was like to have a family to that extent, where she was in a family of, 6 kids and her mom died from alcoholism when she was 13. But I didn't grow up with that experience. So I like to say we're the kind of the dysfunctional Brady Bunch, in that it's just this group of insane people all gathered together under a roof, but with the same purpose.
I have a quick question. Are people allowed to have guests? Like, can anybody who lives there invite a friend over, or?
Yeah, they can. Friends can come over as long as they're sober, or they don't have to be sober, but they cannot come loaded. Family always. No sleepovers or anything like that. Okay. But yeah, they have visitors. It's in between inpatient, outpatient.
Okay.
Yeah.
Curious.
And Ross, just one more thing. I think it's beautiful what you're doing. A couple of years ago, my wife's little sister passed away due to alcoholism. So I really love what you're doing. So
thank you.
It's awesome. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Corrine. Miss Corrine, you got to unmute, babe. We would love to hear you through.
I always do that. I want to say thank you for sharing your story with us. It's very inspirational, and what you're doing to help people is really touched my heart. The fact that you are just helping so many people recover and be the best that they can be. But my question to you is, you were talking about the fear when you went to the yoga class and you didn't want to go in. How do you break through that fear? Because there's a lot of times, sometimes maybe I don't want to post my work on Instagram. Will people like it? I feel stupid. Or other situations where I don't put myself out there based on fear. Break through that.
There's a great acronym that I got from Alcoholics Anonymous that fear stands for false evidence appearing real.
I like that.
That was one of the things that helped me in the beginning. And I really want to make it clear that, I fall into fear daily. Just about and I believe fear is also because I care. So it's also fear is self-preservation, caring for yourself. But when we take it to a point that it holds us back, and that's kind of the work that I had to do in recovery. We do what's called a fear inventory, that we look at the fears and how they've held us back. And there's a statement that I love that's in the reading that says, fear is like an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence is shot through with it. And my sponsor really laid that out to him. And he goes, imagine a sweater, Ross, and you have one thread that's just rolling through your entire sweater. And that one thread is fear. And it's just weaved its way in and out through your life. Now, how can we work on the fears? The fears were coming for me, was part of the work is finding that higher power or God and practice praying and start to learn to have a dialogue. So look, I came from Oklahoma. I grew up in the Bible Belt. I was told I was going to hell when I was 5 years old. And I really don't know why I was told that. But it put a taste in my mouth about religion. And when I got sober, I was like, and they said, oh, you got to find God. And I'm like, here we go. I knew there was a catch. And there's a part in the book, and I think this is really important for everybody. There's a part in the book that says, my friend suggested what seemed like a novel idea. He said, why don't you choose your own conception of God? And then it says that statement hit me hard. It melted away the snow in the icy intellectual mountain from which I stood and shivered. Nobody in my life in 40 years asked me what I wanted God to be. And in that moment, I'm like, so I get to make up what I want God to be. And my sponsor was like, yes. I said, I want God to be like my grandpa. Mm-hmm. And he goes, can he give you the power to stay sober? And I go, I don't know. And he goes, well, why don't we just try? And I said, okay. And he said, from now on, when I ask you to pray, imagine your grandpa. And I'm like, beautiful. And from that point on, the prayers that I learned, everything was like, the prayers are not about getting, but how can I give? And even in fear, part of what I shared earlier is about making amends. And we go out to make right the damage we've done in the past. And I went to employers. I went to everybody to tell them about my alcoholism and that I would never get over my drinking and using till I've done everything to straighten out my past. Here's what I've done wrong in our relationship. And can you tell me anything else that I left out? And then if they don't say anything, I'm like, look, really, if there's even a little thing, you're not going to hurt my feelings. You might save my life, because I want us to always see each other, and that I never feel I have to look away in shame or anything that I did something. And doing those little things, and Luis has heard me say this, and I know Lisa has, esteemable acts create self-esteem. That esteemable act of walking through a fear. And it doesn't matter. I'm on Instagram, and Louisa hears me share. I get in front of a room. You see like from here up, but I am not like this Instagram yogi. And I'm not like this guy that balances on one arm. I'm somebody that comes in. I'm very conscientious at 55. But I have to walk through that to know that it's okay. Feelings have never killed me. Feelings have hurt me, my own feelings. But as I've built a relationship with bringing in a God of my own understanding into my life, I've always been taken care of. And, 9 times out of 10, those leaps of faith of walking through the fear, it makes the fear lessen, brings up my self-esteem, allows me to grow and try new things. And all my best gifts have come through failures. So why not fail? It just means I got to knock off the dust, knock the red off of my face from embarrassment. Embarrassment only hurts up here. I hope that answered it.
Yes, it did. Thank you. I also appreciate the comment that you get to choose what your concept of God was, because I was raised Jehovah's Witness, so I have a lot of stuff where I'm like,
a lot of baggage.
Yeah.
Southern Baptist. Gee, it's like.
I like that. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Anyone else?
Ross, I lived in Oklahoma for 3 years, so I could relate to what it was like. And I enjoyed it also thoroughly at a whole other level. But I definitely never thought a kid from out here in Malibu would be living in Oklahoma for 3 years, but I absolutely did. Made the best of it.
I never thought a kid from Oklahoma would be rebuilding Malibu.
Yeah, isn't that funny? So
you know, and that's I wanted to chime in on that. You know, all of this work, and that's the thing. This life, I came into this life of recovery. This idea of saving my life, my family, doing something different, and Woolsey fires hit.
Mm-hmm.
And I was 10 years sober. And all that got me to a point that when those hit, or when the shootings hit, I was there, and it gave me strength to understand that I am part of a community that's there to serve and not take, to rebuild,
mm-hmm.
and live and be a part of, instead of what I talked about. My wife was like, we stay close knit, we'll be okay. And when we opened up our hearts and let go of what the thing we thought that was so dear to us was just us. And now look where that's kind of come tenfold. Of, I never thought I could be a part of, I didn't understand what it was like to be a part of life.
Right.
Good.
BJ, were you trying to unmute? I want to make sure you're able to share. No. Yeah, I love that you added to the part of staying close and then opening up, because, you know, I believe in marriages, we have these expectations and beliefs of what it's supposed to look like. And because we're doing it with somebody else, and their baggage starts to, it's all, you know, when it's someone else's stuff, it's frustrating. When it's ours, it's like, oh, be compassionate. It's my ouchie. And, you know, and it's fascinating to have survived alcoholism and drug addiction together, and then how beautiful it is and how magnificent it is to turn the corner and be so open. And I love seeing you at yoga, because one of the things that the moment that I decided that I really needed you here and to share with us is the day that you came in and shared vulnerably about how during COVID you were getting up at 3 a.m. to do the yoga on the beach, and why you did that. And I remember when I was pregnant with my son, and I was supposed to be on bed rest, and I wasn't allowed to go into work, and I did anyways with an IV drip in my leg, because I was so afraid my clients would leave me if I didn't. Like, I risked my pregnancy and went into the salon with an IV drip in my leg, because I was so afraid if I didn't, my clients wouldn't be there when I needed to go back. Mm-hmm. And that day when you shared, I was like, I cannot believe that, how beautiful it was to have you share and share the vulnerability around it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a crazy time, wasn't it?
It was.
But it was so poignant, because I had people reaching out to me, and they were just like, what are we doing? And I just took the lead from what I'd done in every different. I was like, well, I'll come out and go to the beach if you guys want to show up. And then, I mean, I couldn't believe how many people showed up at the beach. But it was cold. But it was that one thing of what, you know, I was like, I cannot believe I'm getting up and doing this. And I'd wake up and I'm like, oh dear God, it's going to, you know, but you get there, and then you go through the pain, and the beauty's there, right? And we get out on the beach, the sun's coming up, dolphins are, you know, like, why would I miss this? I've got to quit telling myself the stories.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of when I was 17 and I was taking yoga aerobics classes, and we're outside the room, and you could hear the music bumping, and all of a sudden, like, the doors open, and it's everybody's going in, kind of like the hot yoga room in the morning, and everybody picks their spot. And before you get there, you're like, I'm so tired, I don't want to go. But then you're in the room. And for me, I always heard the instructor speaking up at the front of this room. And in my head, I was always the one doing it in my head, but I never had the courage yet to actually take that on. I promise I will before I end this life, but I will be teaching a class. But then I found my space off of Zoom, because like it's my baby step to being able to do that. And it started in here.
Yep.
Like, it was March of 2020, literally as COVID started, I started hosting Zoom rooms, which I didn't even know how to like log in at first. And it was and while everybody is like, oh my God, trauma, I really totally enjoyed the opportunity of doing something completely different than new. And I have to say, what I really need to acknowledge in here is each and everybody in this room being present, connected, because we all could be watching TV right now. We could all be doing anything else. And we're here, we're connecting, and we're changing lives together. And I know that everybody hears what they hear here, and then the sentences will continue playing in our head later. And just like, I learned the serenity prayer going to AA and OA and all of those meetings. And when I was having panic attacks at night, the only way I would be able to sleep through the night was repeating the serenity prayer over and over again until I'd fall asleep. I would literally dial 911 on my phone because I thought I was having a panic attack. And then I would finally fall asleep. And in the morning, I'd look at my phone and it still had 911 on it. And I'd remember my night. And
well, I like that you said sentences in our heads, and sentences become words, and words become action, and action changes lives. So it's like the ability for you all to come together like this. While it may seem small, we really don't see the bigger picture of the influence that really happens. The connections that happen. Now I know to look across the street from Frank's house in Malibu on Wandermere, and and then all of a sudden these webs start to interlace, and then community grows stronger and deeper and wider. So I think it's beautiful what you're doing.
Thank you. I am so grateful you gave us your time, your wisdom, your love, your being here with us. And I am so proud of Lisa for signing up and being at teacher training. I cannot wait to take your classes. I love seeing you in the mornings. And I love each and every single one of you for being on and really being unstoppable. Lisa, you unmuted. Do I get to hear you? It is really magical what we create here together. And I love that Tess inspired me to do lives. And I literally have, I think it's been over a month on that one too. And I hear her lives and I started doing them. And, even if I'm not perfect, I actually even love that, because a year from now, I'm going to look back and be like, look at how much I've grown. Right? Yep. So it's a ton of fun. Does anyone want to say anything before we hop off for the evening? Miss Tara. Tara's going to be driving 2 hours tomorrow morning to come get a haircut by me. And then 2 hours back. That is a 4-hour trip.
That's commitment.
That's how good the haircuts are.
Oh, yes.
And I love her because I'm missing Ross's class tomorrow. So that's pure love.
Nice.
Wow. I wanted to just say, I don't know if you saw, I was putting in the chat. I've been listening, but I'm like rearranging, making space for some other things in here. And I just want to say thank you for sharing such an amazing and incredible life journey with us. That was super powerful. And I can relate in some ways, not with hosting the safe house, but addiction and recovery and all those things as well. And some crazy stories too. And so, that just really moved me substantially. I want to say thank you so much for the work that you're doing, you and your wife. And it really takes an incredible couple for you to stay through all of that and become such a connected and, to come out on the other side through all of that is just a powerful, powerful testimony of your love and, how much you guys really want that. And again, thank you so much for.
Thank you, Tara.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was going to bring Tara into hot yoga, but then we realized it would ruin her blow dry.
It would ruin her hair.
So vanity still is winning here.
Yeah.
But I will come one of these days, maybe next time.
Good. There we go.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. Have the most magical evening. And Kevin, it was fabulous seeing you. BJ, thank you for joining us. And thank you, everyone, for being on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ross. I will see you Thursday morning.
Okay, I'll be there.
Thank you.
It was really nice meeting everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.